At Thanksgiving dinner, Mom clinked her wine glass with that bright smile she always wore when she wanted everyone's attention on Brooke. "Your sister's wedding was absolutely stunning," she announced to the whole table. Then she turned to me. "So Stephanie, when are you finally going to tie the knot?" A couple of aunts chuckled. Dad just kept carving the turkey like his life depended on getting every slice exactly the same thickness. Brooke sat there perfectly still, watching me with that careful expression I'd learned to read over 30 years. I set down my fork. The sound of it hitting the plate seemed louder than it should have been. "I already did," I said. 8 months ago. In June. You all got invitations." The dining room went so quiet I could hear the grandfather clock ticking in the hallway. My cousin's fork stopped halfway to her mouth. Uncle Jim's hand froze on his beer bottle. Mom's smile cracked at the edges. Dad looked up from the turkey, his face going pale. "Honey," Dad said slowly, "we never received any invitations." That's when I reached into my purse. And that's when everything they'd been hiding was about to come crashing down on that perfectly set table. Growing up, I figured out pretty early that our family ran on a specific system. There were the stars, and then there were the stagehands. Brooke was born first, and she took up so much light that I guess there just wasn't much left over for me. I don't think I was resentful as a kid. I just thought that's how things worked in families. One kid got the spotlight, the other one learned to be okay in the shadows. By the time we hit high school, the pattern had hardened into something that felt permanent. Mom treated Brooke's life like a full-time job. Cheerleading competitions, piano recitals, homecoming court, every achievement got documented, framed, and hung in our hallway like a museum exhibit. When I made honor roll or got accepted to Oregon State, Mom would smile and say, "That's nice, sweetie," then immediately pivot to Brooke's latest thing. Once she actually asked me to wait to share my college acceptance news because the lighting wasn't good enough for Brooke's senior photos. I learned to read the room. I learned to stay quiet. I learned to take up less space. And honestly, I got pretty good at it. But Portland changed everything. Moving 4 hours north for a job at an environmental consulting firm wasn't me trying to make a statement. It was just me trying to breathe. For the first time in my life, I built something that was completely mine. A small apartment downtown with big windows, plants everywhere, the smell of coffee Derek made every morning before his shift at the hospital. My job testing water quality for commercial developments might not have impressed Mom's bridge club, but it meant something. I was good at it. I mattered there. And Derek, God, Derek actually saw me. Not the supporting character version my family had written, but the real me. He remembered things I told him. He asked follow-up questions. He actually listened when I talked about my day. His parents noticed me too, in a way that felt almost foreign at first. Carol hugged me like she meant it, not like she was checking off a box. She asked about my work and remembered the details the next time we talked. When Derek proposed on a rainy morning at Waterfront Park, I didn't hesitate for even a second. We didn't want anything big. We chose a small venue on the coast, invited about 40 people who genuinely knew us, kept everything simple and real. But there was this small, stubborn part of me that hoped my family would show up. That maybe, just once, they'd choose me. I designed the invitations myself. Cream cardstock with sage green lettering. I had them printed at a local shop, addressed each one by hand, and sent them certified mail with signature confirmation. I knew my family's habit of losing things that weren't about Brooke, so I made sure someone had to physically sign for these packages. I checked the tracking obsessively. Every single one showed delivered, signed for by recipient. I let myself breathe then. Let myself hope. Then came the silence. No calls. No texts. Not even a quick congrats, in the family group chat. Weeks went by. The wedding came and went. Still nothing. I told myself stories to keep from facing what I already knew. Maybe they were planning to surprise us. Maybe they were coordinating schedules. Maybe the invitations got mixed up somehow despite the tracking confirmations. But underneath all those maybes, a darker truth was taking root. Someone had made sure those invitations never saw the light of day. I just didn't know how right I was until I pulled out my phone at that Thanksgiving table. The silence after my wedding didn't just sit there, it grew. It filled up every phone call I didn't get, every text that went unanswered. At first I waited, telling myself everyone gets busy. But days turned into weeks, and the quiet started feeling deliberate. I tried reaching out. Mom's phone went straight to voicemail. Dad texted back, "Call you later," and never did. The family group chat, the one we'd had since I left for college, suddenly didn't have my name in it anymore. I wasn't blocked dramatically. I just quietly disappeared. I mentioned it to Derek one night while we were cleaning up after dinner, trying to sound casual about it. "Maybe it's a glitch with my phone," I said, but my voice gave me away. He dried his hands and looked at me. "Steph, did they ever respond to the invitations at all?" I shook my head. "Let's check something," he said. Derek worked in hospital administration, so he knew his way around computer systems. He helped me dig into my email account's activity logs, something I never would have figured out on my own. And there it was, clear as day. The wedding announcement email I'd sent in April. Opened from my parents' IP address. Then permanently deleted. Not just moved to trash, completely erased. The timestamp made my stomach drop. It wasn't an accident. It wasn't a mistake. Someone had deliberately made sure no one in my family saw that email. And I knew exactly who. I could picture Brooke in Mom and Dad's kitchen, going through their mail like she'd always done. Brooke sorted their bills, screened their calls, managed Mom's calendar. If information flowed through that house, it flowed through Brooke first. The more I thought about it, the more it all made sense in the worst possible way. Brooke's wedding was in September, a massive production with 300 guests, a designer dress, a string quartet. Her whole identity was wrapped up in being the center of attention. My small June wedding, even tucked away on the coast, had the potential to take some of that attention. And Brooke had never been good at sharing the spotlight. I pulled up the certified mail receipts on my phone. 4 packages. 4 signatures. All delivered to my parents' address. And there, in that looping handwriting I'd known my whole life, Brooke's signature. She hadn't forgotten. She hadn't lost them. She'd intercepted them. She'd made sure nobody knew about my wedding at all. Derek touched my shoulder. "What do you want to do?" I didn't answer right away. I wanted to feel angry. Rage would have been simpler. But what I felt was something older and deeper, a familiar wound that had never really healed, just scarred over. Thanksgiving was in 2 weeks. I could skip it. Let them keep pretending I didn't exist. But pretending was what built this whole mess in the first place. So I made a different choice. I decided to go. And I decided to bring the truth with me. Thanksgiving at my parents' house always looked perfect from the outside. White tablecloth, polished silverware, candles flickering down the center of the table like something out of a magazine. But the second I walked through the door, I felt it settle over me, that old familiar tension I'd carried my whole life. Brooke was already posing for pictures by the fireplace, Kevin adjusting her hair like they were shooting a Christmas card. Mom was fussing over the ham, telling anyone who'd listen about every detail of Brooke's September wedding. Dad poured wine mechanically, looking tired already. Nobody asked how I'd been. Nobody mentioned the wedding they'd all missed. I sat down directly across from Brooke. She didn't look at me. She didn't have to. Silence can be its own performance, and my sister had always been good at performing. Dinner started the way it always did. Praise for Brooke's dress, her venue, her guest list, her connections. Every sentence was a reminder that they'd shown up for her, over and over, without question. While they couldn't be bothered to acknowledge the biggest day of my life. That's when Mom tapped her glass and said it. "Your sister's wedding was absolutely stunning. So Stephanie, when are you finally going to tie the knot?" The table laughed. Even Dad paused with a carving knife like he wasn't sure which side to take. Brooke kept her eyes on her plate. Too careful. Too still. And that's when I said it. I already had mine. 8 months ago. The room shifted. All the air got sucked out at once. I waited, then added, "You all got invitations." Mom's smile collapsed. Dad blinked like he'd misheard. Across from me, Brooke's face went completely blank. That told me everything. "We never received any invitations," Dad said carefully. There it was. The deflection. The story they'd tell themselves to make it make sense. I felt something settle in my chest. Not anger. Clarity. I figured you'd say that. I reached into my purse and pulled out my phone. I placed it on the table. The screen glowed in the candlelight. Every eye locked on that phone. This was the line I'd never crossed before. The boundary I'd never drawn. The moment I stopped letting them rewrite my story. I opened the receipts. 4 deliveries. 4 signatures. All confirmed. I zoomed in on the first one and turned the screen so everyone could see. That looping, confident signature at the bottom, Brooke. Mom gasped. Dad leaned forward like he needed to see it up close to believe it. Kevin went stiff in his chair, looking between the screen and his wife like he'd just learned she spoke a language he didn't know she knew. Brooke didn't move. These were delivered April 23rd, I said, my voice steady. All 4 invitations. Signed for by Brooke. The silence wasn't surprise anymore. It was exposure. This must be a mistake, Dad whispered. It's not. I swiped to the next screenshot. This is the tracking log from USPS. Priority mail. Signature required. All confirmed. All delivered. I paused. All intercepted. Mom shook her head. No. Brooke would never. Stop, I said gently. Not harsh. Just done. You keep saying what Brooke would never do, but you never look at what she actually does. That landed. Mom froze. Kevin finally spoke, his voice low. Brooke, did you sign for these? Brooke blinked mechanically. I don't, maybe I grabbed the mail, but I didn't see any invitations. I stayed quiet. I'd learned that silence is sometimes louder than any accusation. Dad stared at Brooke. You didn't see 4 packages from your sister? When you knew she was engaged? It's not my job to track everyone's mail. Brooke snapped back. Wrong move. I swiped to the email log. This is the activity log for the family email account. The wedding announcement I sent was opened from this house in April, then deleted immediately. Dad's jaw tightened. Who has access to that account? Everyone knew the answer. Brooke broke. I didn't delete anything. Then why does it show your device ID? I asked. Her mouth opened and closed. Maybe I clicked it by accident. Why are you attacking me? I'm not attacking you. I'm showing you what you did. Mom exhaled harshly. Why would Brooke hide your invitations? That's ridiculous. There it was. The defense she'd been using my entire life. Why? I repeated. Because my wedding was in June. Hers was in September. Because she didn't want anyone talking about mine before hers. Brooke flinched like I'd slapped her with the truth she'd been running from. That's insane, Brooke hissed. You always twist things. No, I said. You did that yourself. Kevin stood up. Lily, is this true? She stared at her napkin. Everyone always thinks Stephanie is so innocent. She never needs anything. She just exists and makes everyone feel. Feel what? I asked softly. She shot to her feet. Guilty. Small. Like she doesn't even have to try. There it was. The real confession. So you hid my wedding because it was quiet. I said. Because it didn't compete with your 6-tier cake. The truth hung in the air. We didn't know, Dad said desperately. If we'd known. You would have come. I finished. After years of missing everything? After making sure Brooke's needs always came first. He closed his eyes. You can't put all that on us, Mom said. We did our best. No, I said. You did your best for Brooke. For me, you did the bare minimum and called it fairness. The weight of 30 years pressed into my chest, not as grief anymore, but as clarity. I looked at each of them. The people I'd begged silently to see me. I didn't lose my family tonight, I said. I just stopped pretending I had one. Mom gasped. Don't you dare. Why? I said. Because it threatens the story you built? The one where Brooke is perfect, Dad stays neutral, you're the peacemaker, and I'm the problem. Nobody said you're the problem, Dad whispered. You didn't need to say it. You showed it. Over and over. Brooke whispered, Stephanie, please. That single word carried years of fear, guilt, and the sudden realization that her control was gone. I stood slowly. I'm done begging for a place at this table. I'm done asking you to show up. I'm done pretending Brooke's choices don't hurt. I'm done accepting your silence as anything but agreement. I took a breath. I'm done. Dad reached out. Don't go. We can talk. We are talking, I said. For the first time and the last time under these terms. We can fix this, Mom said, tears in her eyes. You can't fix what you refuse to acknowledge. And you refused for years. I picked up my coat. As I walked to the door, I heard Brooke crying quietly. I heard Mom murmur my name like a prayer. I heard Dad say, we should have checked. But their remorse wasn't my responsibility anymore. I opened the door, cold November air rushing in. You didn't miss my wedding, I said. You chose not to see it. I stepped outside and let the door close behind me. Not loudly. Not dramatically. Just firmly. A clean line drawn. And for the first time in my life, the silence that followed belonged to me. Derek opened our apartment door before I even got my keys out, like he'd been listening for my footsteps. One look at my face and he didn't ask what happened. He just wrapped his arms around me and held on until the shaking stopped. The next morning, Carol and Frank invited us over for breakfast. No ceremony, no pity. Just warm food, real conversation, and attention that didn't have to be earned. Carol squeezed my hand. Your family here. Not because you married Derek. Because you matter. A week later, Brooke sent a long email. Therapist speak, apologetic, admitting more than I expected. I read it. I didn't reply. Dad called every few days. Small steps. I let him try. Then he found one of my wedding invitations buried in a storage box in the garage, proof of everything I already knew. He mailed it to me without commentary. That was the closest he'd come to an apology that felt real. Mom never reached out. And for the first time, that absence didn't feel like a wound. It felt like an answer. I used to believe family was something you protected no matter what it cost you. But standing in my own home now, Derek cooking dinner, laughter drifting in from friends who choose me every single day, I finally understood the truth. Family isn't who shares your blood. It's who shows up. It's who listens. It's who stays. And sometimes the bravest thing you can do is walk away from the people who never learned how to hold you.